My name is Margaret Cole. I am 68 years old, and on the day my husband's will was read, I sat at the far end of a polished conference table and watched my daughter-in-law celebrate my humiliation. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. The room smelled faintly of coffee and expensive cologne. On the wall behind him, the waves of Seabreeze Cove crashed in a framed photograph, blue and perfect, like the view my husband had loved so much. To Luke Cole, the attorney read, I leave the 7 oceanfront homes located in Seabreeze Cove, California, including all furnishings and contents therein. Brooke, my daughter-in-law, let out a sharp little squeal beside my son. Her hand flew to her mouth, then immediately to Luke's arm. 7 houses, she whispered, not even trying to be discreet. Luke, do you hear that? 7. A couple of Richard's cousins exchanged impressed glances. One of them actually whistled under his breath. They all turned toward my son with the kind of admiration people reserve for lottery winners. And to my wife, Margaret Cole, the lawyer continued, I leave the warehouse property and 40 acres of land near Riverton, Arkansas. He said it in the same even tone, but the room changed. It was subtle, a shift in air pressure. Someone coughed. Someone else murmured, Arkansas, as if the word itself were an insult. Brooke leaned back, her lips pulling into that sympathetic smile I had come to know too well. At least she gets something, she said softly, just loud enough for the table to hear. A storage building is better than nothing. The cousins avoided my eyes. One of them patted my hand, the way you might comfort a child who'd just dropped her ice cream cone. I folded my fingers together to keep them from shaking. Grief for Richard, anger, and something like bitter amusement tangled in my chest. He had warned me this moment would come, but it still landed like a slap. When the papers were signed and the final questions answered, chairs scraped back. Brooke was already on her phone, saying, Oceanfront, 7 properties. Can you imagine the content? While Luke shook hands with the lawyer, dazed and smiling, I stood slowly. As I passed my son, I laid my hand on his shoulder. He finally met my eyes, a flicker of guilt passing through his. Congratulations, sweetheart, I said, my voice steady. One day you'll understand what your father really left you. He frowned, confused. Mom, you got the warehouse. I'm the one who should be saying that to you. I smiled, a small, tired thing. Luke, I whispered, you still don't understand anything at all. Then I walked out of that room full of ocean photographs and polite pity, clutching a manila envelope only the lawyer and I knew existed. That night, after the will was read and the polite pity of 6 relatives clung to me like damp air, my house felt unfamiliar. The rooms were still the same soft shades Richard and I had painted years ago. The furniture sat exactly where he left it. But as I locked the door behind me, the quiet seemed to fold over my shoulders and settle there like a heavy shawl. I placed my purse on the kitchen table and stayed standing for a moment, palms pressed against the smooth wood. Outside, the street was calm, the way only coastal towns can be after sunset. I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the block and the distant hum of a passing car. Everything was ordinary except the hollow feeling behind my ribs. The manila envelope in my purse tugged at my mind. The attorney had slipped it to me with a discreet nod once everyone else walked out chattering about ocean views and 7 whole houses. His voice had been low, respectful, almost apologetic as he said, Your husband wanted you to have this privately. That tone alone had told me the envelope mattered more than any property deed. I pulled the envelope out now and felt the weight of it in my hands, light physically, but unbearably heavy in meaning. I sat down, pulled the lamp chain on the table, and let the warm light pool around me. For a long heartbeat, I simply stared at my name written on the front in Richard's small, careful handwriting. I traced the letters with one finger, remembering the way he used to tuck notes like this under my coffee mug when he left early for site inspections. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a single letter, thick with the kind of thoughts Richard had rarely spoken aloud. The first line blurred slightly as my eyes filled, though I hadn't expected to cry. I had spent weeks preparing for his passing, bracing myself with the kind of strength long marriages teach you. But seeing his handwriting, the precise slant, the steady pressure, brought everything rushing back like a blow to the chest. He thanked me for standing beside him during the years when he reached too high or stretched himself too thin. He confessed he had always relied on me to balance his enthusiasm with patience, to be the anchor while he chased the horizon. He apologized for the test he knew he was leaving behind in the form of those 7 shimmering, burdensome homes. "They look like wealth," he wrote, "but they function like traps. Insurance, repairs, storms, taxes, every one of them demands more than they give. I built them too fast, too proudly, using too much borrowed money, believing I had more time than I did." I breathed in slowly, the truth settling deep. I had suspected the numbers weren't as golden as the views he loved. I had seen him stare at spreadsheets late into the night, his jaw tight, his shoulders tense. But he never complained. Richard believed in solving a problem before naming it. Then he turned the letter toward Riverton, the warehouse. He described the land beneath it, the aquifer that stretched silently underground, the water pure enough to make the beverage companies compete for rights. He explained the months he spent negotiating environmental protections, sustainability clauses, and minimum quarterly payments. He detailed the safety assessments, the geological surveys, the slow, meticulous work he preferred far more than the glamorous oceanfront projects. "That warehouse looks empty from the outside," he wrote, "but it is the only thing I built that cannot drown us." I pressed the heel of my hand to my mouth, swallowing the ache rising inside me. I remembered standing beside him on that cracked parking lot years earlier, the day he first walked the property. The humidity had been thick, the air hot, but there had been a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. He'd crouched, pressed his palm to the dry earth, and smiled like he was touching the future. He ended the letter with a truth he had once struggled to say aloud. "I didn't leave the warehouse to Luke because he isn't ready to understand it. You are. You have always understood what lasts. If he comes to you humbled, show him what this place can be. If he comes to you arrogant, let him walk away. He must arrive here with empty hands." I leaned back in my chair, the letter trembling slightly between my fingers. The kitchen clock ticked steadily behind me. Somewhere outside, a car door closed. The world went on, unchanged, while everything inside me shifted. Part of me wanted to tear the letter to pieces, march back to that attorney's office, and hand every bit of Riverton to Luke before his inexperience cost him more than pride. But Richard's words held firm in my mind. Let him fall. It felt cruel. It felt necessary. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope, and returned it to the drawer next to the sink. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat down in Richard's old armchair, the cushion dipped under my weight the way it always had, as if expecting him instead. I closed my eyes and let the soft hum of the refrigerator fill the quiet. Somewhere in one of those oceanfront houses, Luke was probably standing on a balcony with Brooke beside him, staring out at the waves and believing the world had finally handed him the life he deserved. He didn't know yet that the ocean doesn't hand out blessings. It hands out warnings. And when the tide finally pulls you under, Only solid ground can save you. I whispered into the empty room. All right, Richard, I'll wait. And when the tide turns, I'll be ready. In the weeks after reading Richard's letter, I tried to settle back into routine. I cooked my simple dinners, watered the potted herbs on the porch, and walked the neighborhood in the early morning when the air still held a bit of coolness. But my thoughts drifted constantly toward Luke and the world he was building on top of sand. I didn't hear from him much during those weeks. Instead, I heard from everyone else. At the grocery store, someone would mention a photo shoot happening at one of the coal houses. At the cafe, a young server would smile proudly as she told me Brooke tipped well after a catered brunch she filmed for her social media. Even my neighbor, who rarely talked to anyone, waved me down one morning to show me a short video on her phone. "That's your son, right? He looks so happy." I took the phone gently from her hand and watched. Luke stood on a cliffside balcony, the Pacific behind him glowing gold in the sunset. He held a glass of white wine while Brooke narrated behind the camera about manifesting abundance and honoring Richard's legacy by living boldly. When she swung the camera toward him, Luke smiled, but it was the polite, cautious smile he used to give relatives during holidays, not the real one that showed when he relaxed. I handed the phone back, nodding. Yes, that's him. That night, I sat on my porch, rocking slowly, staring at the dusky horizon. The envelope in my drawer felt like a weight pulling at the house from the inside. If Luke knew the truth behind the 7 houses, he would stop performing and start preparing. But Richard's words echoed every time I felt tempted to intervene. He must come to Riverton on empty hands. Brooke didn't help. She sent me cheerful messages once in a while, photos of new light fixtures, glimpses of designer patio sets, snapshots of their feet in the sand with the caption, "Building our dream, one beach day at a time." I always replied politely. There was no point in correcting someone who lived for crowds she would never meet. Eventually, I decided to visit. I needed to look Luke in the eyes, to see whether he was truly as thrilled as the photos suggested, or if he was simply drifting along on Brooke's current. I texted him early one Saturday morning and asked if I could stop by. His response came quickly, full of exclamation points as if he were trying to convince himself everything was perfect. Of course. "Mom, Brooke is making lunch. Come around noon." When I pulled up to the largest of the 7 homes, I almost didn't recognize the place. The landscaping was new, immaculate, sculpted hedges lining the walkway, white stones scattered like decorative pearls along the path. The front door stood wide open, music floating out, something upbeat and expensive sounding. Inside, the scent of citrus cleaner mixed with something buttery. The living room glowed as if staged for a magazine spread. New upholstered chairs, a massive abstract painting above the fireplace, throw pillows arranged with precise intention. Brooke swept into the entryway wearing a linen dress that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. "Maggie, oh, you look lovely. Come in," she chirped, kissing the air near my cheek. A camera sat on the kitchen counter, its ring light humming softly. 3 glasses of wine sparkled under it. She guided me toward the patio where Luke was arranging cushions around the outdoor fireplace. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him. Still handsome, but worn at the edges, like fabric stretched too tight. When he saw me, his expression softened. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm glad you came." We sat outside while Brooke returned to the kitchen to finish plating. The ocean stretched in front of us in long, rolling sheets, the wind carrying the scent of salt and something faintly metallic. "How are you doing?" I asked him gently. "We're good," he said, but his eyes darted toward the kitchen before settling back on the horizon. "It's just been a lot. Managing everything. People want to rent the spaces, host events. Brooke's trying to get us into some luxury home network. There's always something happening. And how do you feel about all of that? I pressed. He shrugged, one shoulder rising slightly. It's opportunity. Mom, that's what she keeps saying. Opportunity. But is it your opportunity? I asked. Or hers? For a moment, he didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the sliding door where Brooke stood photographing a salad like it was a rare sculpture. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I thought inheriting these houses would make things easier, that I could breathe for once. But it's like every room has a list of things that need to be done, fixed, upgraded. Every month there's a new fee or inspection or something. He sighed. I haven't slept well in weeks. I reached out and touched his hand. Your father never meant for anything he built to become a burden. Luke swallowed hard. I know. I thought I could handle it. Before I could respond, Brooke floated outside with plates in hand, her smile dazzling, her energy bright as a stage light. Lunch is ready, she announced. Let's eat out here. The lighting is perfect. The moment between Luke and me evaporated under her cheerfulness. I watched him straighten, mask sliding into place. The plate she handed him was beautiful, but he barely touched it. As I drove home later, the sun sinking behind me, I felt Richard's warning resonate deeper. Luke was not thriving. He was performing, and performances end. The tide was shifting. I could feel it in my bones, and when the wave broke, it would not be gentle. The first real sign that the tide was turning didn't come from Luke or Brooke. It came from an envelope addressed to Estate of Richard Cole. It arrived mixed in with my water bill and grocery coupons. Nothing about it dramatic or alarming, but the moment I saw the return address, the county tax assessor's office, my stomach tightened. I carried the envelope to the kitchen table, slid a finger under the seal, and unfolded the papers. It wasn't anything catastrophic on its own, just a clerical notice about updated assessment values on one of the Seabreeze Cove parcels. But the line item listing the annual property tax made my breath catch. It was higher than the salary Luke used to bring home in a year, and that was for one house. I sat very still, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. Richard had warned me about the debt connected to those homes, but seeing the numbers spelled out so plainly made the truth feel sharper. 7 houses, each demanding more than Luke could possibly sustain. I knew my son hadn't fully grasped the reality of the inheritance. Brooke had filled his head with visions of brand partnerships and glamorous retreats. She saw the houses as stepping stones to fame, not as financial responsibilities. I debated calling him immediately, but something in me said to wait until I had the full picture. So I went through the rest of my mail, then returned to the letter several times as if the numbers might soften on a second reading. They didn't. 2 days later. Luke showed up at my house unannounced. He looked exhausted. His hair, once neatly styled, was pushed back as if he'd run his hands through it too many times. His shirt was wrinkled, and he was carrying a large cardboard box filled with unopened envelopes. He set the box on my kitchen table and stepped back as though it might explode. "Mom," he said quietly, "I need help." There was no false confidence in his voice, no carefully curated smile, just raw, honest fear. I pulled out a chair for him, then opened the first envelope from the box, a mortgage statement, then another, a notice about overdue insurance, a warning from a maintenance company. Each paper told the same story. Too much debt, too many responsibilities, too little income. "How long have you been getting these?" I asked, though I already knew. "Months," he admitted. I tried to keep up. I really did. But every time I made a dent in one thing, 3 more showed up. Brooke kept saying everything was temporary, that we'd get big deals soon. He laughed once, bitter, humorless. She kept telling me I needed to think like a wealthy man. And what did you think? I asked, folding another letter slowly. He dropped his head into his hands. I thought I could handle it. I didn't want you to think I was incapable. I reached across the table and touched his arm. Being overwhelmed doesn't make you incapable. It makes you human. He looked up at me then, eyes rimmed red. I think I'm underwater. Mom. Before I could answer, the front door burst open and Brooke swept in like a gust of expensive perfume and anxiety. She looked startled to see the two of us surrounded by papers. Oh, she said, freezing. You're doing the bills. Luke straightened. We're not doing the bills. Brooke, we're drowning in them. She rolled her eyes as though he were exaggerating. Luke, you're spiraling again. We just need a few more brand collaborations. I'm meeting with a photographer tomorrow. We're months behind, he interrupted, voice shaking. The bank called 3 times this week. We can't keep pretending this is working. Her face hardened. So what? You're giving up? Just like that? God, maybe your father was wrong about you. The words hung in the air like broken glass. I stood up, feeling my pulse throb in my throat. That's enough. Brooke turned her attention to me, chin tipped high. With all due respect, Margaret, you don't understand the opportunity we have. I understand numbers, I said calmly. And these don't lie. Luke looked between us, shoulders slumping. In that moment, I saw him choose reality over illusion. But Brooke wasn't ready for that choice. She grabbed her purse with shaking hands. I'm not staying here to watch you sink, she snapped. Call me when you decide to fight for what we built instead of running to your mother. She slammed the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. Luke closed his eyes, the muscles in his jaw clenching. I reached for another envelope and placed it gently in front of him. Son, I said softly, running to your mother isn't the problem. Pretending you can swim in a storm without a life vest is... He let out a breath that sounded like defeat. What do I do? You'll pack a bag, I said. And tomorrow, you'll drive with me to Arkansas. There's something your father left you. It's something solid. He looked confused, desperate, lost, all at once. Mom, what did he leave me? Not what you think, I murmured, and definitely not what Brooke wanted. The tide had finally pulled him under. Now it was time to lead him to shore. Luke followed me into the warehouse like a man stepping into a different version of his own life. The pumps hummed steadily, the air cool and clean. It wasn't glamorous, but it carried a kind of dignity the ocean houses never had. He stood in front of the glass window overlooking the filtration room, watching workers move with calm purpose. No flashing lights, no staged dinners, no audience to impress, just water, machinery, and responsibility. This is the first place I've seen in months that doesn't feel like it's collapsing, he murmured. It doesn't collapse, I said. It supports. I handed him the final folder, the one Richard asked me to give only when Luke arrived humbled and ready. He opened it slowly, reading the last letter from his father. I watched the change in his face as he absorbed every word, the guilt, the regret, the realization, and finally, something quieter, acceptance. I thought losing everything meant I failed him, Luke whispered. No, I said softly. Failing would have been refusing to learn. You came here. That's enough. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, exhaling shakily. What do I do now? You rebuild, I answered. Not the life Brooke wanted. The life your father believed you could grow into. For the first time in a long while, I saw clarity settle behind his eyes. Not excitement, not pride, something steadier. A willingness to start at the bottom and climb honestly. The next hours passed simply. I introduced him to the staff. He listened, asked questions, rolled up his sleeves when one of the technicians needed help moving a crate. There were no cameras, no applause. And yet Luke seemed lighter, as if shedding the life he'd nearly drowned in. As we locked up at sunset, he paused in the doorway, looking out over the quiet Arkansas fields. "Mom," he said, voice low. I thought I inherited the ocean. But this feels like actual ground. That, I told him, was your father's gift. He slipped an arm around my shoulders as we walked toward the truck. The sky burned gold behind us, the warehouse standing steady in its silhouette. For the first time since Richard died, I felt something loosen inside my chest. We had lost so much, but what remained was finally, blessedly, real.